The war has now entered its 35th day, and tonight the dynamics on the ground appear to be shifting in a significant and potentially dangerous way. For the first time, US Airpower may have taken direct losses over Iran, with an F-15E reportedly shot down and questions over a second aircraft the same day. At the same time, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is reportedly pushing out senior army leadership amid the conflict, a strategic reset or a sign of deeper problems. On the ground, the war is expanded beyond military targets, now hitting critical infrastructure, raising serious humanitarian concerns. In Lebanon, the death of a UN peacekeeper marks a dangerous escalation, and globally, the impact is already here. Oil up, food prices rising, and markets bracing for what comes next. So tonight, is this simply a war or escalating more and fundamentally changing? We discuss this and more with our panel of guests in just a moment. To discuss all of this, we bring in our guests. First, Mr. Greg Simons, professor at Daffodil International University in Dhaka. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, Mr. Abdelrahmi Bissaha, economic expert from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. And first, let's start with the reports that were indicating that a U.S. F-15E was shot down over Iran with one crew member still missing. If this is confirmed, does this mark a turning point where U.S. vulnerability itself becomes part of the conflict? Perhaps we start with you, Mr. Greg.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was always a risk when you go to war. And you can see, I mean, if you look at CENTCOM, for example, and their press releases, there is not a single press release since the 31st of March. So this is quite a few days. So my take on this, what are they hiding if they are not releasing any kind of information? It's like the White House. So yes, this has been an F-15 lost, and from what I understand, one of the pilots is dead and one of them has been rescued. But this is quite a humiliation. But it's a predictable one because Iran is not definitely not Iraq, and it's not Libya. But you've still got this arrogance from the United States. I mean, listen to Donald Trump. This is the biggest, greatest army the world has ever known, ever, the most powerful, etc., etc. It does not mean you're invulnerable. And the only measure that they seem to be going by is measure of activity. They boast about, I think it's around 12,000, excuse me, sorties, aerial raids. But what is the effect of these aerial raids? They're bombing schools, they're bombing universities, they're bombing civilian infrastructure and openly bragging about bombing bridges, which is a war crime. And you don't have a great measure of effect. Of course, when you get aircraft like an F-15 and potentially others, as you indicated, this is a humiliation. And Trump doesn't handle humiliations well.
Trump doesn't handle humiliations well. Mr. Bissaha, after what we have seen today, two jets shot down in the same day, we're seeing perhaps immediate reactions in the market. So do those incidents and accidents directly impact investor confidence in energy pricing, or the reaction is more driven by fear of more escalation in the coming hours and coming days as well?
I think you answered your question. First of all, this is normal stuff that happens during wars. Some pilots, their planes get shot. They get sometimes prisoner by the enemy. But this is normal. It doesn't mean anything. However, it doesn't bode well for the next phase of the war, as much it doesn't bode well for the uncertainty that is going to continue surrounding the economy and the investment. Remember, in his speech on Wednesday, President Trump didn't convince much of the United States citizen and didn't convince much of the world. So we don't know exactly what will be the next phase, but the next phase will not be an easy one. And we are navigating this total uncertainty, which is the enemy of the economy. And second point I would like to make, of course, this is a war that has now translated into one of the biggest energy shock to the global economy that we have seen, bigger than the one in 1973. First of all, it's a supply shock. Second, the prices have risen and they keep rising because of the uncertainty that is facing the economic world.
Mr. Simons, we also heard about a second U.S. aircraft that may have gone down the same day under unclear circumstances. We have just mentioned this, but does this raise deeper questions about the sustainability and the risk level of U.S. operations in the future?
Well, there was always risk when you go to war. Wars are unpredictable. The United States went in on hubris, arrogance, and ignorance, and they're paying the price. And I suspect this is why so many generals are now getting fired, because they say this is not possible, but they keep doubling down on this. Because for Trump, this is about him personally. He doesn't want to be seen as losing, like Biden and his retreat from Afghanistan, which he keeps on ridiculing. So, I mean, looking at it, he will keep on doubling down, and likely, I think it's no coincidence that you had these top generals fired, including the chief of staff, general staff.
We will perhaps get your more comments on the three generals and why they were fired in just a minute. That's a very pertinent point. Mr. Bissaha, perhaps the oil prices are now climbing again above $100 per barrel. Their markets are again reacting to the actual disruption, or mainly to the uncertainty, which you just called the enemy of the markets, around what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz?
It's both, because the market are paying a lot of attention to what the leaders are saying, and the rhetoric and some of the facts, like the firing of the generals. It's because these generals were not happy with the war, so he had to get rid of them in order to get some people around him that will support. And as I said, it doesn't bode well for the next phase, because the United States cannot just leave like that without the Strait of Hormuz open. It cannot happen. Coming back to Afghanistan, you know, I worked for 5 years on Afghanistan. The decision by the United States to leave Afghanistan was a good decision. There was nothing else to do. Afghanistan is not a country with a nation. It's a group of tribes. It doesn't have the national unity. There was no reason to stay there, especially they couldn't continue wasting money in a country that was not that was hostile. So it was a good decision for me, knowing very well Afghanistan, having worked there for 5 years. So to reiterate your point, Miriam, it is exactly the uncertainty, the lack of visibility, and the idea that if the president says the war will keep going for the next few weeks, of course you have the prices that are volatile, the uncertainty about investment, the financial market, which are in total turmoil, the monetary policies, which are now being tightened. So the international financial conditions are being tightened, and there will be some impact on the world economy.
Maybe back to you, Greg Simons. You have spoken about the Pete Hegseth firing top 3 U.S. generals. Why are they doing this? What is the excuse the Pentagon is given? And how could the removal of these top army generals affect the readiness during the Iran conflict? I mean, they're firing them amid a war they're conducting right now.
I think it comes back to what your other guest was saying. And this is rooted in the philosophy, and this has been stated by Sun Tzu and von Clausewitz. War is politics by another means. And I mean, it's like Afghanistan. I agree that they should have withdrawn years ago, but Trump sees this as a humiliating withdrawal. I mean, this coming from some guy who presented himself not so long ago as the peace president, but now is the initiator of the biggest war for quite a while in West Asia. And it's not going well. This is why he's firing people. The military is saying this will not work. I suspect he has the idea of some kind of ground incursion, which is going to be an absolutely unmitigated disaster, because when the United States is not a land power, definitely not beyond the Western Hemisphere, it's an aerial and maritime power, which is why it is using its air power at the moment. It can't use its maritime power because it will get destroyed. You'll, for example, have a laundry room fire on your largest carrier, which is sheltering in the Mediterranean. So it's not going well. He's desperate. He has nowhere to go from a war of choice he initiated, and he's looking for a dignified exit. There is no dignified exit for him, and so he's resorting to try to install around him yes men who will tell him what a great leader he is. And so his megalomania cannot accept the military realities on the ground.
So there's no dignified exit, you are saying, so we can see that the decision they took was based on battlefield performance or political or disagreements inside the Pentagon. You're saying that it's a humiliation for him. He keeps claiming some victory every now and then. How can we understand the decision to oust 3 top generals in the army?
You asking the question for me?
Perhaps I was following up with Simon's, Greg.
Okay. No, I mean, it's a sign of utter desperation. I mean, you can see Trump when he gets up to speak these days. I mean, look at the body language and sometimes even the voice intonation. It's not from someone who's confident. It's from someone who's desperately trying to find a way out. Remember these idiotic slogans that they have, peace through strength, and these different Orwellian constructions. I mean, the whole Trump brand and legacy is disintegrating at his own hands. And this is not a sign of confidence. It's not a sign of strength. It's a sign of weakness and desperation, which the rest of the world sees. And hence, the Iranians rightly and rather innovatively mocking Trump and his mental state of being at the moment.
Back to you, Mr. Bissaha. So Trump is failing, and he's showing that he's victorious. I mean, we're seeing that they're ousting top army generals. We're talking about the Army Chief of Staff, the first in the U.S. Army, being ousted. How do you interpret these divisions inside the Pentagon?
I mean, you have to remember, you have to go back to the first mandate of President Trump. In those first days of his first mandate, he surrounded himself by some very strong people, like the Chief of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor. But these were not yes men, and therefore he progressively got rid one by one. This second mandate, he is surrounding himself with yes men. And this is how you can explain the brutal removal of these generals, because they were highlighting the fact that, first of all, the United States did not face any imminent threat to go to war. Second, there was no strategy. Third, there is no exit strategy. And fourth, there was some kind of underestimation of the time to bring down Iran. Having said that, both countries are playing the information war. So you have to be very careful about what both belligerents are saying. Again, we will see what happens, because the president said on Wednesday that he will be there for 4-6 weeks, but he can change his mind. Then the only big problem that will remain to be solved will be the removal of the restriction to access and navigate the Strait of Hormuz.
Understood.
And the damage was considerably done to Iran as well to neighboring countries. At the same time, also, a lot of damage was done to the Gulf countries, which share, of course, the Strait of Hormuz with Iran. So we have to follow up on what these countries are going to do next. What will President Trump do? And then but at the same time, we are all navigating without any visibility, which is a disaster for the world economy in the face of such a huge energy shock. Again, I emphasize, we have never seen a shock like this of any magnitude, where 10 million barrels are missing a day. During the 1973 war, it was 4 million barrels. And we have about 5% of the LNG capacity. So it's a huge supply shock, which translated into the first wave of inflation. Plus turmoil. First wave, because we might have the second wave, which will impact the revenue and all the other sectors of the economy. So we are into a big ride. At the same time, the financial markets are not convinced that the war will stay long. If you take a look at the prices today, and then I will finish with that, the price today on the spot is $109.24 a barrel. The price for delivery in December 26 is 81. 81 because the capacity has been destroyed, because infrastructure has been shut off. It will take time to reopen it. So that you can see you have ambivalent messages from the financial sector.
From the financial sector. Also, Mr. Bissaha, the White House has asked the Congress to approve a $1.5 trillion military budget in the fiscal year of 2026. What does this say, and what does the timing of the White House asking the Congress to approve that budget say about their strategy, perhaps?
Actually, this is a huge request for funds for the defense, but this is going at the same time. He is trying to finance that without deteriorating the fiscal deficit of the United States, which is huge, by cutting on domestic programs. So what you have, it's a very huge policy shift with massive military spending that will be offset by domestic cut. This is why he requested $1,500 billion. This is a clear reallocation of resources from social spending to geopolitical and military priorities. Because remember, geostrategically speaking, the US doesn't have any interest in Europe, doesn't have interest in the Balkans. It reset policy in favor of Asia, because for the US, the adversary is China. It's not Europe. It's not the Gulf country. It's not Middle East.
Mr. Simons, maybe back to what is happening and what we are seeing. Iran is openly claiming responsibility and framing this as a strategic success. What happened today? How important is this politically for Tehran to show it can impose direct costs on Washington?
Well, it's essential because militarily they do not have the same hard power capability and capacity as the United States and Israel, because Israel is the one constantly pushing this, and every time something looks like it's about to die down, they launch some strikes. So Iran, this is an existential conflict. And the thing for them, the biggest weapon is to close the Straits of Hormuz. It's the natural one. And while everyone is focused on energy supplies, what is getting less attention is the fact that in the Northern Hemisphere, you have the growing season about to start, and you have a fertilizer shortage, which supplies are coming through this, used to come through the Strait of Hormuz. So this is going to have not only the short-term and medium-term effects, but can have longer ones depending on how long this goes for. Iran understands this, and this is their leverage. And I mean, it's a very strategic waterway. The US, being a maritime power, relies on open maritime transport corridors, such as the Strait of Hormuz and Red Sea and the South China Sea, all these other waterways. And this is close to them. And this reminds me somewhat the role that geopolitics plays when you get politicians who have some kind of fantasy without military understanding the actual realities playing out again, as it did in 1915 when you had Britain, Churchill namely, attack the Gallipoli Peninsula to open the Dardanelles. And we saw historically what kind of disaster that is, and the same kind of miscalculations were made, that the Ottoman Empire was on its knees and this would finish it. You have this second sneak attack on Iran with the supposition that these measure of activities will bring Iran to its knees. It does not take into account the resilience of the belief and the political and military leadership and the people's will to fight, especially when the civilians are getting targeted to the extent they are in this current war. So it's not only about this physical aspects of it, it's also about the psychological aspects to this conflict.
Mr. Bissaha, Greg Simons has just mentioned that not only energy infrastructure is being targeted, but also water infrastructure, and that is critical. So if they keep getting targeted, the water systems, the energy systems, what does that mean economically in terms of long-term recovery and stability?
First of all, the only sticking point to this war is the Strait of Hormuz, okay? The Strait of Hormuz is a vital trade and oil channel. At one point, this Strait of Hormuz, the reopening, is not the problem of just the United States. It will be the problem of China, which gets a high percentage of oil from there, of India. It will be also a problem for the Gulf countries who cannot let this kind of thing continue. And also even Russia is in favor of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. So what I foresee is some kind of an international force that will either diplomatically or through defense means to reopen. And Iran knows that. The Strait of Hormuz is a leverage as long as there is a war. Once the war is over, they will have to reopen it. Even because for one reason, if the boat continue to pay the fees, this will be considered international piracy after the war. Second, remember that the International Revolutionary Guard are considered as a terrorist organization by the US and the EU. So any boat that pays the fee, the $2 million, $1 million, is going to feel the sanction by the Europe and the US, and all the owners of boat will not try to, they don't want to be also subject to some kind of fees and or embargo. So it will find a way, and this is the sticking point. And again, it's valued for Iran only during the war. It's not sustainable for Iran. It's not sustainable for the United States. For the United States, you have a different view. The conflict, just I will finish very quickly, it has an economic cost. Again, the price, the gallon is now $4. It was $2.70 on 27th of February. It has a political weight because the United States citizens are not convinced by the war, and they might vote in favor of the Democrat. Just for the little story, the electoral circumscription where Mar-a-Lago is have been now in the hands of the Democrats for the first time. And then you have a geostrategical big issue. Actually, as I said before, the adversary of the United States is China and not Europe or whatever. This is why they divested from Europe and from the Middle East.
From the Middle East, maybe as the last question to Greg Simons.
One last point. Yeah, one last point I would like to make, and then I give the floor.
Go ahead.
It might strain, knowing that the President of the United States is reacting always emotionally. I am a little bit concerned about the future of NATO. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bissaha. Maybe as the last question in a minute, because we're running out of time. I'd like to mention Lebanon. There is a UN peacekeeper that has been killed amid the escalation. Just quickly, do you think that this signals a dangerous threshold where even international forces are no longer insulated, and that this war is going beyond control? No one is actually trying to stop it or can stop it.
The war has long been out of control, and this was predictably so even before it began. Israel's reckless disregard, and now the United States has joined it, attacking civilian infrastructure and so forth. This has already been displayed in Gaza, in the genocide there. It is also, this fact that they intend to annex southern Lebanon up to the Litani River. International law is dead, and this has been noted. The German president rightly said international law is dead. Of course, the mainstream media criticized him for stating the obvious, and the biggest abusers of international law are the United States and Israel, the same ones claiming to be the most moral forces in the world.
Mr. Greg Simons, you joined us live from Dhaka. Thank you very much for your participation. And also Mr. Bissaha, you joined us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for your valuable insights and time.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, our dear viewers, and see you in our next editions.